Welcome to episode 110 of the OmniGamersClub podcast, the podcast for games on all platforms, including sketching dungeon maps on grid paper. I am Daniel Winter.
And I'm Mark USA. Happy Father's Day to you.
Yes, likewise, Mark. Hello. Father's Day and daughter's birthday all wrapped in one weekend here, so hitting both ends of the parenthood spectrum there.
Busy. Yep, I'm gearing up for my summer vacation, as I imagine you are too. Mm-hmm. Yep, so busy all around here at OmniGamer headquarters.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of a funny episode here. Not so much of a three-course meal, but perhaps more of like a tapas platter. A few miscellaneous topics to clean up, both following a couple of sort of big tabletop episodes with some special guests that we had recently, and also wrapping up some topics from leading up to our holidays and other things that we've been playing. And also, this may be our last episode before a bit of a break. We're both happening to be going on vacation at the same time over the summer, so rather than trying, bank a whole bunch of extra episodes and do overtime in that regard, we're going to actually enjoy our holiday and just take the summer off. So should probably be gone for about a month or so, and we'll be back. So this may be the last episode. We may sneak one more in. Stay tuned to Bluesky probably for more information.
Right. Probably our first episode after we come back would be in sometime in August, yes, at the earliest.
We'll be going for July, pretty much.
There you go. All right, shall we roll into it?
Yes, yeah. What did you have for our appetizer today?
Yeah, I wanted to do, like you said, we've been talking to our guests, so we haven't had time for it. I'm not going to talk about Summer Games Fest, except that while that was happening, there was a hardware announcement. And then, of course, there's been the ongoing kind of like release and follow-up from Nintendo Switch 2. I understand one of us has a Nintendo Switch 2. We probably won't delve too deep into it, but I'm just thinking new consoles, new hardware is on my mind. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to point out that Aftermath, the excellent independent news outfit, I think I probably heard them talking about it on their podcast Aftermath Hours, of which I also subscribe. But if you want to go read this article, it's on the Aftermath website. We'll share a link in the notes. But it's I guess controversially called "Video Game Consoles Are Dead," and it's a little doom and gloom, but a little bit more like asking questions, which is like all I'm saying as well. Is I think we're all feeling differently about consoles at this day and age. So the Nintendo Switch was launched. There was some grumbling about high costs, and then there was whole debacle about tariff prices and controversy. I think the hardware accessories were slightly increased in price, but the base hardware itself was not increased, at least in North America. In cost, there's a discounted home country price in Japan for a Japanese language only device, so that's a bit of a controversy as well. And then in the Xbox showcase, which happened during Summer Game Fest, they announced new hardware as well. This was not entirely unexpected. This has been long rumored. They finally announced the partnership with, I believe it's Asus, who have their own Republic of Gamers line of hardware. So essentially they are branding one of their Asus ROG allies and calling it the Xbox Ally. It's actually two different SKUs, but it's going to be slightly different. So they are releasing two SKUs, one kind of lighter with less hardware space, and one that's kind of more kind of like a X versus S, if you want to call it that. They both have a dedicated Xbox button on the front and some other aesthetic details, but what interests me is that you can see this in some of the videos that they've shared on YouTube, is that Microsoft has gotten behind the screen, essentially, and made kernel level tweaks to Windows. So this is the first time they're making tweaks to Windows specifically for handheld gaming PCs. So this is really exciting, and from all intents and purposes, this is not going to be limited to the Asus product. So all of this to say, some people are excited, some people are not. And some people are feeling, is the age of consoles over? Part of me believes it is. Right now, it seems like the safest bet seems to be with gaming PCs, which the PC master race, quote unquote, has long believed. I'm not one of that group of people. I don't know. How are you feeling about this, Daniel, as a new owner of the brand new console?
Yeah, well, I've been interested in the concept of a Microsoft portable handheld. With Xbox being my sort of default gaming platform at the moment, my interest has waned quite a bit in light of the current boycott. I have not watched that Xbox conference or looked into the information regarding that new tablet. I imagine it's going to skew pretty expensive if it's anything like the other ROG Ally devices. And I mean, as you just hinted there, I did manage to get in at the 11th hour and track down a Nintendo Switch 2 right before my daughter's birthday. So we've been playing with that and the new Mario Kart the last week. So I think that right now I'm feeling pretty good about that as a sort of default handheld device, plus my my Ambernic, other sort of smaller retro gaming devices. I have heard some rumbling lately about this whole era of handheld gaming, which is on one hand is great about the accessibility and flexibility of like everything's available in the handheld, but on the other hand, we've gotten away from this era of games designed specifically for handheld, for smaller handheld devices, smaller games like your Final Fantasy Tactics, your Zelda, the Minish Cap. I think we were discussing on Aftermath. I think it was those games that were designed for the handheld format at a particular scale and screen size, ostensibly. But now everything has to be HD and big screens and like these giant handheld devices that are not portable. They might be handheld, but they're not portable.
Yeah, I've espoused this idea before. I'm not the only one who believes it, but I think the hardware really makes certain games, and the form factor really makes certain games. So, Tetris on the Game Boy original, black and white, is a totally different beast from Tetris on the NES or Tetris in the arcades, which was very popular in the Japanese market, for instance. So the hardware really does matter. It changes things, and that's part of what made me kind of resistant to the Nintendo Switch in the first place. Initially, I thought the Nintendo Switch original generation was super smart. Oh, this is great. I love handhelds. This means I get the power of a home console on the go. Turns out those promises were not so fully realized because it was pretty underpowered, and
it's awkward
all
middle
felt
ground
that.
there, isn't it?
Yeah, and just low screen resolution. I recently have flipped to the other direction on that. I'm feeling really positive about the OG Switch now, with a few caveats. It's not great for all the games that are released on it. They're really pushing the envelope on that. I feel like Nintendo should not have approved certain games because of how very poorly they run on the OG hardware. I think a lot of them are being reported to run super great on the new hardware, by the way.
I've seen some comparisons to the the Pokemon Scarlet Violets, and how like it's been upgraded on the Switch 2, but it just puts into perspective how terribly those games run on the original Switch.
Yeah, but I feel almost like 180 degrees positive about small, bite-sized indie experiences. Like, especially since I've gotten my Nintendo Switch Lite, it feels like the continuation of the spirit of the PS Vita. Like,
Yes,
I get to play like puzzle games. I get to play 2D RPGs. I get to play some of these visual novels that are fully voiced, and this is a great way I can play those light games.
And they've been popping out a bunch of like remasters of older like Japanese RPGs, like Suikoden, I think it's called. Right. Luna. There's a big collection of Final Fantasy older games.
Yep.
Yeah. So those games, like even remastered, don't have a huge sort of resource drain, I would imagine. Right. Pretty perfect sort of form factor for that.
So in that sense, I think that fits the spirit of what you were describing there, that need for like a portable oriented device. This finally feels like a portable oriented device, provided you play the right games on it. So for that, I'm really enjoying it. And also, I'm enjoying some of the Nintendo Switch Online
Yes, I was about to
retro
say.
service games. Really, generally good on that platform. So I don't have a easy final determination or verdict to how to feel about consoles. I'm just saying I feel a little unsettled about the direction of consoles, and we'll see how it pans out. I'm not sure, but go read that article. There's some good thoughts. Talks about the cost. Talks about the scalability. The software. Where does it belong? Where should you buy things? It just raises a lot of questions, and it's intriguing stuff.
I will say people have been saying consoles are dead for like more than 5 years. They're not dead yet. They're still going. They are skewing in a weird direction where the line between console and PC is getting more fuzzy, and the affordability is somewhat diminished. There is very little in terms of affordable console devices now, handheld or sort of otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Nintendo Switch 2 supports a mouse mode. I would have never predicted that, even though I did play, what was it, Mario Art?
Oh, Mario Paints, I think.
Mario Paint.
Yeah.
Back in the day. That was a lot of fun.
I was just reading about it. There was a SNES mouse, apparently, that I never saw. That was compatible with the game I'll be discussing a little later.
Very cool. All right. Sorry, I talked at length, so why don't we move on to your topic?
Yeah, well, just a quick topic I wanted to throw out since this is related. I saw an article from GameSpot talking about Game Pass and questioning whether it devalues games. There was reporting from the developer of Revenge of the Savage Planet, basically, that game is available on launch on Game Pass, and basically saying that they didn't feel that they got a good deal out of it, and said that the sales didn't translate. They were hoping for friends to talk about the game and then their friends to buy it, or buying DLC, and they didn't necessarily see that, which is interesting. I think the other shoe has been due to drop in Game Pass in terms of the affordability and the value for both publishers and consumers. Anecdotally, I had spoken to a couple of local game developers who thought they did get a good deal. And I'm not going to talk about the value of Game Pass. I think we're still both boycotting that service as it currently stands. But I did think it raised an interesting question in terms of game discoverability. I think this fits into the larger thing. I don't know that whether Revenge of the Savage Planet was going to do well or not. I don't know if Game Pass really made a difference in there. I think discoverability is the bigger issue here. And trying to say that it would have sold better if it weren't on Game Pass feels a little bit like reading tea leaves. It's the same way that people would... You used to hear developers say, oh, the game was pirated too much, so we didn't sell as many copies. Those sales are not necessarily going to translate, right?
Yeah, and also we should consider that some games, especially the indie games that are often featured, many of the indie games that are often featured on Game Pass are relatively short. So if you're able to finish it in the span at which you have Game Pass subscription, I think I played a bit of Revenge of Savage Planet?
Well, I think this is the sequel. It's a sequel to an older game.
I played the original.
Yeah, so did I.
Back in the day.
It was a good game. I remember liking that one.
I did too. So some of these games would never have been tried unless they were on Game Pass. And I can think of a couple occasions where I have literally bought games because the Game Pass lapsed. So for The Forgotten City is an example of that, where I bought that recently. And that's quite a short game. Anyways, these are anecdotes. It's not scientific.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. Just the real struggle right now is games being seen, and I think for smaller developers at least, taking the guaranteed check of Game Pass is often a better gamble than literally gambling that your game will be discovered and somehow break containment to sell a high amount. So
yeah, and part of Game Pass is the marketing too. Xbox actually markets games that get released on Game Pass relatively well. They put it out on their trade shows, they put it out on their direct marketing, they put it out on their social media. So it's a big corporation putting out some buzz. And I imagine that there's some transfer over, right? Even when recently some Xbox exclusives have jumped over to the PlayStation side, which I actually fully support, probably there's some notoriety because probably a whole audience that didn't get a chance to play it before gets a chance to play it now. So it sort of like reintroduces it, like a second wave. So can't say one way for sure.
I will say I am still trying to be more intentional with where I purchase games, but like supporting games, not like necessarily paying full price, but going to the effort of paying and supporting games where I can if I've enjoyed them, especially trying to shift my more attention to the Nintendo platform. With that said, so last episode we talked a little bit about the Summer Games Fest. And one thing you probably saw a lot as part of those various conferences was demo available now. And the day after that, you had the next Steam Next Fest had launched, which reminded me that I've still got several demos queued from the last two Steam Next Fests. So I continued to queue up a bunch of demos over the last week and actually got through quite a few of them. Mark, have you checked out any of the later recent demos?
You know, I'm really bad about playing demos, especially on PC. I can generally get around to playing a couple of demos on console, but it's something about the, I don't know, sit forward nature of playing on PCs that I can't make myself do it unless it's a game that has a little bit of a buzz. I've downloaded the demo of the 100 Line. The game by the Danganronpa people.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Which I'm excited about trying out. It's really unfortunate, you know, like I don't say never, I generally don't buy full price games just because, you know, I have a family to think of, expenses to think of. But there are a couple of games that I really want to support, like the 100 Line, and I think Raincode is another game by a studio that I appreciate their games quite a bit. I don't know, we as individuals can't be beholden to keep indie studios alive, even though they do great work. So we do what we can.
Yeah, we broadly don't get review codes, obviously, as independent podcasters here. So, yeah, it is interesting just to mess around with a few different experiences that I wouldn't otherwise try. And it is a good alternative to Game Pass that these demos are becoming more widely available. Like, for a long time, demos were just not really a thing. Since the sort of the Xbox demo disc days, or your PlayStation demo disc, I guess. But yeah, I did play through a few in the last week, and a couple I just wanted to quickly shout out. One is called Morsels. So this is developed by Furcula, published by Annapurna. So this is another sort of roguelite game. Basically, it's really sort of garbage pail kids, sort of disgusting sewer aesthetic with this retro TV. It's like CRT layered over the top. But you were playing as these little creatures, basically collecting them as cards, and you can actually have like 2 or 3 different creatures that you can swap between, and each of those play slightly differently, like they have different attacks as you're moving through these worlds. But the thing that made it stand out for me was there was a lot of mini games. You were constantly finding these little like mouse holes that you could pop into, and there'd be like a Frogger mini game or a dungeon, a claw machine mini game, and a bunch of little mini objectives to try and do to break up that core sort of shoot 'em up loop. The other thing was there was a bunch of like esoteric layers, like things you could find around the world to like pick up or interact with that it wasn't clear what they did. Like if I carried it, like I figured out a couple that if you carry it to the end of the level, something happens. Wasn't entirely sure, and I wasn't sure if that was the game being sort of esoteric or if it was just tutorials don't always explain themselves. And I found that across quite a few of these tutorials, was they didn't really onboard you. It was just throw something together, let people mess around with the pieces. But it did remind me a bit of like even old school rogues like Toe Jam and Earl, which I never played a lot of, but it's sort of weird sort of punk vibes of you don't really know what you're interacting with, just a bit of weirdness around the edges.
Yeah, I definitely played some Toe Jam and Earl as a Sega kid. I don't love it as much as some people do. It's a little bit kind of formless and imprecise.
Yeah, I struggled. I checked it out once or twice, going back as an emulation, and it didn't really catch me. I couldn't really make sense of what it was trying to do. It was back from a much weirder time in game design.
It was for a lot more style than substance, let's say.
Yeah, and this may go either way. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't poke at it quite enough. But what I did see compelled me. That's Morsels. Another game I tried was called Mina the Hollower. So this is from Yacht Club Games, who most of you would know from Shovel Knight and a bunch of other Shovel Knight related games. I never played any of the spin-offs. I've only played the original Shovel Knight. But this is a very similar aesthetic, sort of 8-bit NES style pieces, but more of an isometric top-down, like Zelda style gameplay. So it is more of an adventure game. A lot of secrets to be found, and the way you interacting with combat and things. But it also had some weird esoteric elements that I couldn't figure out. I had to one of the core elements seems to be that you can burrow down into the ground, and both as part of combat, and you can find secrets and pop up underneath some collectibles to find them. And the game never explained that. There was a couple of really specific maneuvers you need to do, to cross holes. You needed to burrow underground and then jump at this really precise time to cross this gap. I couldn't quite figure out the timing for that. It was a bit of a struggle, but I was otherwise really enjoying this game, and I was enjoying this adventuring and the finding secrets so much that it took me a while to realize that this is actually a Souls-like game. You are collecting a resource, and then you lose that resource when you die, and then you can basically cash it in to level up and increase your attack or health. Fairly simple stats in that regard, but I really enjoyed the aesthetic and the core sort of adventuring loop of that. I hit the first boss, and it was really hard. I could not beat the first boss, but I was also at the point where, for a demo, I already knew I liked the game. I wasn't going to throw myself at that wall. I'll move along and I'll revisit it when the game's out.
Yeah, I haven't played a lot of Shovel Knight, even though my oldest kid has, and I'm a fan of the source material, which is the original DuckTales games for NES, right? So I am a proponent, and Mina looks nice, super cute, and very Zelda-like. We talked about Zelda Minish Cap before, and looks like old school Zelda. So I like the look of that for sure. Yeah,
one more quick recommendation. Another game that I didn't have much fun with triggered a recommendation for Ball X Pit, or Ball Times Pit. New game from Kenny Sun, published by Devolver. I think because Devolver always has a big press conference, weird meta commentary, video, mixed media conference every year. This year they only had a short one showcasing this single game, which I tried, and it's basically riffing on Breakout, where you have this paddle at the bottom, you're bouncing balls up to break blocks above you. It's giving that to the roguelite Vampire Survivor loop, where you're bouncing balls, and then as you destroy, the blocks are basically monsters, and as you destroy those, you get orbs that let you buy new types of special orbs that might do lasers, or they might freeze enemies and do this variety of things, and you can level those up to be more powerful. By the end of a run, you've got 20 balls bouncing around simultaneously. It is incredibly overwhelming and overstimulating that it gets to the point where you can't really track what you're doing. It's just let the balls do their thing. But it is incredibly satisfying in a way that I found so many roguelikes these days are trying to do too many things at once to differentiate themselves. And layering 3 different systems and intertwining things, and just for the gimmick of it. Whereas this does this one thing really well, and I really enjoyed that. Because it has, after each run, you go to a town where you you're building buildings and you getting new characters and getting resources. But the way you harvest resources is you get your workers and you bounce them around your town, the same as the breakout mechanic. So it's really doubling down on that bouncing mechanic in some fun ways.
I'm a big fan of breakout mechanic. I love to heck the game called Alleyway for the Game Boy. I think it's part of the Nintendo Online package, but that was a game that was constantly in my original DMG 01. What a classic. I mean, that mechanism deserves to be revived. So anything that spins a twist on it sounds great to me.
Yeah, a lot of polish to this one too. I did lie. I do have one more recommendation, sorry. Partly because this feels like it has some interesting inspiration from tabletop games. This is called Flick Shot Rogues. So basically feels like a dexterity flicking game. You have a simple, a one-screen map. You have one character, it's a pirate-themed game. You have a pirate in the middle of the map, and you have some enemies scattered around, and you're basically dragging the your figurine, and as if you're flicking them, and then they're bouncing around. They crash into enemies. Fairly simple stuff. The way things are animated, it very much feels like they're like chess pieces or board game pieces on one of these like flicking games. But you do start layering on some, again, roguelite elements in that you can give them upgrades. Like one of my characters, I was able to give burn and then like build this really interesting synergy around hitting as many enemies to just cause them to burn and then retreating and then letting them burn themselves out. So there was quite a lot of different like opportunities for synergies and interesting strategies in how you interacted with that fairly simple flicking mechanic.
Very cool. All right. You have any more news stories for us?
Let's leave it at that.
Sounds good. Shall we roll into the main course then?
Yes, yeah. Why don't you tell us what you've got for us today?
Oh, I get to go first this time.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I will talk about a game that's been on the back burner for like a month or so now, perhaps longer. I was going to talk about it before we had the string of guests. Anyways, the game I'm talking about today is for a Nintendo platform. Yeah, not talking about Xbox anymore. It is a game I got out of the library. It's old game gets made new. The game was originally released on the Wii U, and the game's called Xenoblade Chronicles X. Yes, I played the 2025 Switch remake, and this is a game in the long-running, at this point, Xenoblade Chronicles, Xenosaga, Xenogears extended universe, I guess you could say, from Monolith Soft, not Monolith, by the way. And the publishers is Nintendo, and like I said, original platform Wii U, Nintendo Switch is the new one. So this game, like the single-player RPGs, Chronicles 1, 2, and 3, it can be played single player. This can be played multiplayer as well. And it's a third-person action role-playing game, pretty much open world. I think it is open world. From everything I've seen, it's 100% open world. And it plays a lot like the sort of definitely extent genre, subgenre of virtual MMO. Have you played many virtual MMOs like Sword Art Online or what is it, Dot Hack? Is another one.
I've not played any of those. I am very much interested in that sort of meta game within a game concept. I found most of them tend to be pretty campy in a way that doesn't really fit my tastes. But I'm tentatively curious about some of those, but I'm not really sure where to start.
Yeah, this one is not so much a game within a game. Like as far as you know, you're just the characters in this game. But the mechanisms play a lot like a MMO, everything except the monthly subscription. So basically, you're this dude. You wake up from this you crash landing of a colony ship. Kind of like early story is vaguely reminiscent of Battlestar Galactica, the new series, a little bit. You're part of this extended fleet, and your ship, which looks a lot like the Frontier from Macross Frontier, crash lands on an alien planet, and it forms the basis of a new city, which is called New Los Angeles. And I don't know why they picked LA.
I do have to talk a little bit about the absurdity of this city. I have played a little bit of this game. I borrowed it from the library. But it is very much modeled on LA in that it is a city designed for cars. It is like a 5x5 block city, half the blocks haven't even been constructed yet. It's just like empty space. But there's roads between every block, and there's cars driving like 2-3 blocks to the other side of the city. And like, why are there roads in this dang city?
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't know. I guess everyone has a car, perhaps. And there's like distinct neighborhoods too. Like there's this kind of industrial zone,
residential neighborhood.
There's like a commercial zone and a residential zone.
Which has like 5 houses.
And it has like one employer too, which is like the governmental organization. Basically the kind of like Battlestar Galactica, the people running the ship or the fleet kind of get translated into this new colonial power that manages the planet. But aside from that, the story is not much to write home about. You have I believe they're a silent protagonist. And
you actually create your character here, though, as opposed to the other Xenoblade games.
Right, that's true. And you have a lot of side characters that can go along with you. You can build out a party of 4 eventually. And I believe you can play this multiplayer online. I haven't played it multiplayer. No, just touched upon the single player side of things. And the combat is very reminiscent of the other Xenoblade games, or at least of Xenoblade
Of the
Chronicles
first one more so.
1.
Yeah.
Has the very much the kind of horizontal bar
The
UI,
toolbar. Yeah.
which I think is the worst, basically, insult to game design, or yeah, basically UI design I have ever experienced multiple times at this point now. Why did they do this to me when there's something like 7 or 8 attacks? They didn't map it to the face buttons and using the left and right triggers as shift keys, for instance, like plenty of other games do, like Sword Art Online did very well many years ago, well before this. No, they wouldn't do that because that wouldn't make a lot of sense. I actually have to spend time clicking multiple times to get 5 spaces over to the other one.
So you can watch your cooldowns go up, Mark.
Yeah, or I could play it. I could press a button and instantly activate it as soon as it becomes available. So that's my first gripe with this game. You played a little bit. What did you think about the action side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken about Xenoblade 1 and 2 over the last year or so. I think, a lot more sympathetic to that system, that series than you. I do absolutely have my complaints about it. I wasn't particularly concerned, like, I wasn't bothered by that combat mechanic, I don't think. It's not the best, but I found the world and characters around that interesting enough to put up with it. But that way, I do think they do a few things here to make it a little more interesting. In that there's these little quick time events that pop up. Basically, a character will call out a particular color, which is a type of attack, and if you can activate one of those, you get a small boost. The other thing being that you've basically got this sort of alt meter building up that basically lets you immediately activate an ability rather than wait for the cooldown. So you can like fire off some things immediately. So it is a little more dynamic than the original Xenoblade game. It is still showing its age, definitely. It does feel quite clunky. I never really got deep enough into it though. And also just the fact that you're customizing your toolbars and your attacks, and you very quickly have more than will fit on there, and trying to figure out what I should put in and what out. A lot of like debuffs and buffs that I'm not clear what they do at this point, and yeah, I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to build a strategy in this game.
Right, and this game, interestingly enough, it has the main character can be one of multiple classes. I think there's something like 6 or 8 classes, and they're all forgettable names or whatnot. They're mostly kind of like Monster Hunter. They are sort of focused upon the weapons that you carry. And so you are always carrying one ranged weapon and one close combat weapon.
It's strange because these classes are presented to you as jobs, basically, right? Like they say, oh, you can be an explorer, you can be a scientist, you can be a soldier, but it's given to you in context of the universe, not as like, what is this class going to play like?
Yeah, and I don't know if those are actually overlapped upon each other. I remember the introductory mission where they explain all the 8 or 10 job types to you and what they kind of stand for. Like one of them is for like dropping these like beacons on the map, and which essentially are your fast travel beacons, and they also reveal sections of the map. So that's a legitimate job. And there are other legitimate jobs.
I chose, actually.
I think one of them is like PR or something like that. Like you're literally talking with the people about how great the colonial powers are doing, what a great job they're doing. So, of course, support them if you can.
Yeah, it's propaganda.
Yeah, but the sad thing about that, really cool concept, the sad thing about it is it's toothless. You end up doing all of the missions for all of the job classes anyways. So why did you introduce an artificial restriction? There is no restriction for what I saw. But yeah, the I don't know if it directly maps 1-to-1 to those character classes that affect the combat, but essentially the character classes are formed by a combination of a melee weapon and a ranged weapon. I found that essentially all the classes felt the same as each other. I felt like some of them were a little bit more melee focused and some of them were a little bit more ranged focused. But they don't play nearly as distinctly as said classes from a more legitimately effective action game like Monster Hunter. It's just no comparison. This is a pale shadow of that superior game. So it's failing on a couple of different fronts here in my mind. The monster design is actually kind of cool. I thought the world, it's obviously very like Avatar inspired, and the monsters are similar as well. There were some cool monsters. The scale is actually pretty impressive.
That's one of the coolest things about this game. They all have an incredible sense of scale of like monsters literally towering, like they feel life size of like dinosaurs towering over you, basically.
Yeah, and not just the dinosaurs, but like just like the geography of it. Like you have these mountains and hills, obviously, but you have these highly improbable land bridges that are like a mile up in the air. And this, the Switch, the OG Switch that I was complaining about earlier, actually does a decent job of rendering some of the basic geometry. Obviously, there's pop-in that happens, but there's also like fairly dense jungle-like foliage areas that were fairly impressive too. So they're doing impressive stuff with the hardware. And once again, this is a 10-year-old game.
And it is like an open world, seemingly. Like there's one large map that you can explore. I mean, there are sort of level gates to an extent, but whereas the previous Xenoblade games were like large areas and like in a chain.
Right. Yeah. Leveled and instanced out. But absolutely everything I've seen of this game is open world, including that original city. Like that original city is part of... That one hub city is part of the open world. You can go exit from this exit or the east-west exit or the west exit. And like I said, there is a lot of kind of verticality to the topography.
Figuring out how to get
from
A to B, not necessarily an easy task.
Yeah, and there are some fun things to do in the world. There's this sort of... the premise is that your giant colony ship has kind of broken up. And I won't tell you what, but there's hidden things sprinkled throughout the world. And that is I don't know, eternally appealing prospect, right? It's like, let's gather all the puzzle pieces, let's find all the Dragon Balls and put them together.
It's supposed to be an uncharted world, that uninhabited world, but something was there before us.
Exactly. And unlike some other games that are kind of like they balance the levels to the character, you can actually go to some fairly lethal areas and get like straight up killed. So that's, I think, a good thing.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I think Xenoblade 2 really struggled with that because you have these giant towering creatures that can like cross the map in an instant. It's very easy to be fighting a level appropriate monster and then just have something come out of off field to just stomp you. Whereas here, like a lot of the bigger monsters, at least in their starting areas, were largely minding their own business. Like you could avoid those high level stuff if you needed to. It wasn't the balancing of those levels felt more appropriate here.
Right. So there is some stuff to appreciate here. But largely, I came upon this game pretty much right after playing a couple of really strong RPGs, namely Metaphor Fantasio and Clair Obscur, which we've covered recently on our episodes. Did we cover Clair Obscur? I think we did, right? Yeah, we did. So it just like the contrast was just massive, right? Like a lot of these games are either really refining the latest kind of stage of JRPGs, or they're kind of treading a new path, and the combat is actually like really fun, or really streamlined. And this just feels old and clunky. It's showing its age.
Yeah,
and I think you would be badly served paying for a full price release. Sorry, a full price Switch 1 release. $80 Canadian or whatever for this game. When it's literally a 2015 game. I'm not going to continue to play this. I've already returned it to the library and I won't be taking it out again. So there's just way better RPGs out there to play, I think. And I haven't completely given up on Xenoblade somehow, even though I've gotten burned from the first two games I played. I still will check out Xenoblade 2. And I own number 3 as well, which they say is pretty good.
2, as I talked about, is a much more dynamic combat system. It is not it doesn't feel like that MMO. It's a lot more things going on. I think it's way too complicated. It's like 5 different systems laid over the top of each other, and I struggled with keeping track of them all and balancing them all simultaneously. But it does not feel like an MMO for what it's worth.
Cool. Yeah, my main complaints with this one, Chronicles X, is that essentially the characters are not that interesting. The world building is not that interesting. They have like the terrible, annoying mascot character.
What's that sound? Meh.
Yeah,
Like, it's a sci-fi game, but I hope you didn't think you'd escape the Nopons, Mark.
no, and the combat is just not that good. So I would recommend avoiding this.
I had a decent time. I wouldn't mind playing more of it. Not high on my priority list, but I did recently pick up Xenoblade 3. I've heard that's the best of the series, and I realized I had a Nintendo voucher that was about to expire, so I just grabbed that on the whim. So I'm looking forward to playing that first, I think, before I return back to this. It's from a time where Ubisoft-itis was running rampant of this open world filled with icons, basically, and not a particularly compelling way to build a world.
Definitely, yeah. I did the very same thing with my voucher. I have a copy of Xenoblade 3. Maybe I'll play that on the airplane.
Likewise.
But let's talk about some other fun games. How about you give your section?
Yeah, I actually got a little bit of... I got a couple of games to talk about here. I teased recently, you were talking about Gargoyle's Quest. And I mentioned that I had also been playing a retro game from my childhood that I was waiting for the right time to talk about. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a retro game roundup. So the game I primarily wanted to talk about today is called Jurassic Park. Not to be confused with the game Jurassic Park on the NES, or the game Jurassic Park on the Game Boy, or the game Jurassic Park on the Sega Genesis, which are all completely separate games with completely different mechanics.
Or the game Jurassic Park Evolution, or Evolution 2, or the newly announced Evolution 3 for PC either.
Well, those didn't even have subtitles. They were all just called Jurassic Park. This is released for the SNES, the Super Nintendo, in 1993, produced by Ocean of America. So, yeah, this is a game that really sticks in my mind as being quite unique for its time. I mean, I'm going to bury the lead and say that it's not a particularly good game by today's standards. I think examining it as a product of its time, it is doing some incredibly interesting things from a time before genre tropes were better established. And primarily being that you start the game and it's an isometric top-down game. You're playing Alan Grant exploring the park, fairly sort of open-ended. Like, it just drops you in, go figure out what you need to do. And you're running around picking up eggs, shooting dinosaurs, or running away from dinosaurs in many cases. But then you find like the visitor center in the center of the map. You go inside and it's suddenly a Doom clone. It is a first-person shooter, essentially. And it's like, it's not the most polished in that regard. It's like there's 2 enemy types. You've got your Velociraptors and your Dilophosaurus. Is that one? The spitting one that eats Dennis Nedry. But you've got 2 types of dinosaurs, and they're going to just either stand there and spit at you, or they're going to rush at you. Not the most engaging gameplay there, but the interconnectedness of those 2 game modes of going in and out from like first-person shooter to isometric, I found particularly engaging, especially for its time, and just mixing those 2 different gameplays. And it is particularly open world in the sense that you have to backtrack across this world multiple times. You're going to become really familiar with this world in a way that I've got another game to talk about. But backtracking has become a bit of a dirty word by today's standards. And I think that's one of the things that dates worse in this game, that you are going to do a lot of backtracking. But I will say you really do develop a sense of familiarity with this place in going back and forth and exploring it. And like you have to, these gates you have to open, and I think there's 3 gates scattered around the map, but only one can be opened at a time. So every time you want to open one of those gates, you're going to go back into the visitor center and log into the computer and open that gate, which closes the other ones. And so there's a lot of fiddliness in that regard, but it was a sense of immersion there at the same time. And I talked about, I think it was Indiana Jones being an immersive, slim game, and I think this sort of almost fits into that as well, partly because like when you're interacting with these computers, it literally breaks you into a computer interface which was apparently compatible with the SNES mouse, and you've got this like virtual mouse cursor with the clicking on it, and there's like these fractals generating in the background with this really cool aesthetic, and like you're clicking
Chaos
through.
Theory.
Yeah, well, you're clicking through the sub menus of the computer interface, and yeah, surprisingly immersive in how you're navigating the space, and it's going to be a very frustrating game if you're not playing it with a guide. Somehow I did it back in the day. I remember beating this game as a 10-year-old, but by today's standards, you're going to get lost because like the only way of knowing what you do is like I think you go to a save point and you'll get like this pop-up of a character saying Alan, and he's like, oh, go turn on the generator. Okay, where's the generator? So you just wander around the world trying to find the generator until you find a door that says, Ian Malcolm's keycard needed. Okay, where's Ian Malcolm's keycard? And so there's a lot of there's all these keycards that are like named after characters. Why is there a door that only Ian Malcolm can access? I don't know. It's just, a lot of name dropping going on, but you at the very least you need to keep notes as well. I found this key card and I know there's a locked door for that character in this facility. So at the very least you probably need to draw some maps or take some notes if you're going to not drive yourself insane in this game.
A lot of old school games are like that. We talked about Blueprints the other day, having to pull out a notepad and write down clues and leads and tracks to pursue. I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that adding a little bit of friction to an experience is a positive thing and adds a little bit of, verisimilitude or immersion, another catchphrase, into games. Some games of older generations, let's admit it, were intentionally frustrating to intentionally cheap as well. So it's not all positive.
Yeah, I mean, quality of life is one thing, but at the same time, I think that friction does create so much more immersion and familiarity with these games, and in forcing you to engage with the systems rather than following the path of least resistance. It's a fine line to toe, obviously, and I think many people would struggle with this game by today's standards, but I found the experiment of what it was doing and mixing different mechanics really fascinating. It does the Halo gun system, where basically there's like 5 different guns you can pick up over the course of the game, but you can only carry 2 at a time. Like, well, do I carry the tranquilizer gun or the rocket launcher? And so it forces you to make a choice. Not a particularly interesting choice in that the rocket launcher is better than everything else. Why use a tranquilizer dart, which has like a delayed effect when you can just blow a velociraptor up? But it was experimenting and doing some fun things there.
Was there any sort of like strategy to the rarity of the ammo or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, I never really struggled. I always had plenty of ammo. If you leave a room and come back, basically the ammo replenishes, so you can game up pretty easily. So it's not balanced in that regard, but they were trying something. The one last thing I wanted to say was that to getting tips as to what you should do, like I said, the characters pop up. One of the characters that pops up is Dennis Nedry, and he'll just give you wrong information. Like, he'll just tell you to go to the wrong part of the map, and so don't listen to Dennis Nedry. Oh, and one final tip: pause the game; it gives you dinosaur facts. Winner.
Love it. It's worth the price of admission. I'm fascinated by 8-bit and 16-bit games that have more than one game engine in them. Just there's a treasure trove out there of games that will kind of surprise you, and you don't know what you're getting into just by looking at the box art or the back of the cartridge.
Yeah, I was reading up a little bit on like when this game launched, and it did get a lot of feedback praising its sound design and visual design for the time. Like, it's not going to look like much by today's standards, but it was like a pretty standout hit when it first launched, and. One final thing is that it is available as part of a Jurassic Park collection, I think it's called. Like, it's like 12 old Jurassic Park games bundled in one package. Half of them are just called Jurassic Park, but this is the SNES one. You can buy it on most platforms available now.
Yeah, I really like how some of these old school collections are including like really old entries into these series, because what are they, like a few 100K or whatever? Like, include them, like somebody that's going to be their favorite childhood game, this was, it seems, with you.
Yeah, I do want to revisit some of the other ones. Like, there was a couple of side-scroller Jurassic Park games. One where you play as a velociraptor, I believe. And I am still incredibly excited for Jurassic Park Survivor, I want to say, which is like a first-person, I think, immersive sim game coming out, giving me a lot of Alien Isolation vibes. At least that's what I'm hoping for.
Nice. Maybe you're going to have to do some sort of like Far Cry 2 level jungle survival mechanics. That's really cool. Any other retro games that you wanted to cover?
Yeah, well, just quickly, I did play some Gargoyle Quest that you mentioned. I don't have anything specifically exciting to talk about. Again, probably for its time, it was probably really good. It's just a platformer by today's standards. The one thing I did really stand out to me, though, is how much it feels like an adventure game in that, like, you've got the overworld that you're navigating, and the whole having verbs to interact with the game. Like you've got like you talk, search. I can't remember the exact ones, but you can interact with the world. Yeah, it feels like a adventure puzzle game in that regard. Like there was one point where I hit a wall where someone had asked me to get the goblin stick or something, and I found it, went and spoke to him, and he's like, "Oh, thanks, you got the stick. Okay, what now?" And it took me a while to realize I had to go back to him and press use to give it to him. And so there's a little bit of that trial and error, which, like, again, a little bit dated by today's standards, but it does immerse you in that. It is trying to be more of a role-playing game.
Yep, just another game with two engines to it. It's got the top-down overworld map, and then it's got the side-scrolling action sequences. So that lived very large in my mind as a youth.
Well, one more game that did those two different engines, both, again, first-person and isometric. So Jurassic Park, definitely not the first. Is that I've been reading a book called Fight Magic Items, which is a history on the JRPG genre, basically, largely through the lens of how it came to the West. But particularly interesting was reading up on the early days of that genre, like your Dragon Quest, your Final Fantasy, obviously. But my main takeaway reading through that history was I need to play Phantasy Star. So, Mark, was it Phantasy Star 2 that you had on your top 10 list?
Yeah, I actually had never beaten Phantasy Star 1 back in the day, and Phantasy Star 2, I don't think I've beaten that either, but I did play many, many dozens of hours of that, and it has strong kind of, dug deep. That's why I added it to my top 50 games list the other episode.
So apparently, as recently as 6 months ago, all four of those early Phantasy Star games are available on Nintendo Online. As of recording, only 4 is available. One is available through, like, you can buy it through, like, this Sega remaster, I think, but it's got some quality of life features that will be great for some people. Has some things that I perhaps don't want, which I'll get to shortly. There was, like, all of the games are available in Steam, but apparently they've all been taken down in the last 6 months. I'm not sure what's going on there. Hopefully it means Sega's working on something new.
Yeah,
we'll
that would be cool. I have them, I think I have all the old school ones on a GBA cartridge, GBA compilation, which I'm very pleased I own.
Well, that's what I am currently playing. The GBA has, I think, it's either all 4 or at least the first 3. In one package, and there's a little bit of quality of life, like there's a save function and some rebalancing, I believe. So I'm really enjoying this, I will say. It is also surprisingly pulling on a lot of TTRPG mechanics in that you have a lot more verbs for how you interact with this world, talking to creatures, searching the world. It's surprisingly immersive. Like, and again, similar to Jurassic Park, you're going to be doing a lot of backtracking. Like, I think there's 3 planets. I've only seen 1.5 so far, but you get a lot of back and forth walking around, and you're going to get really familiar with this world. You use
a lot of items like adventure games as well on the environment,
and it's not always clear what they do. Like, I've got a magic lamp. I have no idea what it does. A little bit of trial and error. And one of the struggles with these classic games, obviously, is that often there was often a lot of more context and information in the manuals that is just not available anymore. Obviously, I'm not sure how much of that information or like hints were given.
Yeah, I think on places like Nintendo on Classics, they actually do have an interface that shows you the manual. So I would recommend. There's like some button is mapped to it. I forget which one.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, you do have to be really proactive in exploring every nook and cranny, or just use a guide. Obviously, I've only used a guide insofar as making sure I'm on the right track and not like wasting time backtracking constantly, and having to experiment with all of because all of the spells have only like 4 letters. Obviously, a restriction of the hardware, and I'm led to believe that like in Japanese, you can do a lot more with 4 characters than you can in English, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do like a whole sentence in 5 characters, for instance.
Yeah. So there's definitely some a lot of context loss in the English version there, unfortunately. So you do have to experiment a little bit. Like I've got a mage who has a skill called Tele. And I thought, oh, teleport, and it means I can fast travel. No, it's telepathy, which means you can talk to characters, apparently. So, and like some creatures you can talk to, and then you don't have to fight them. And like it's a little bit of trial and error trying to figure out which monsters are actually intelligent enough to talk. Maybe not the ones you'd expect.
Yeah, I beat Phantasy Star 1 for the first time ever a few months back, just before we did the top 50 video games episode, and I would say, like, you can't beat this game without a guide, or I would not recommend trying to beat this game without a guide. Maybe you could in the 80s when people had infinite patience, but it's just downright cheap sometimes how much kind of repetition and backtracking and hidden elements there are. So I would say if you reach the 3rd planet, you should probably start thinking about pulling out the guides.
Interesting. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about it so far because I've got a notebook. I am mapping out the dungeons on the grid paper, and you often, like, if you're not searching every corner of these dungeons, often like there's one corner and there'll be just some random dude in the corner of this dungeon who says, "Oh, this material will melt. It will melt all of these other materials," which is like a key plot point, basically. And like if you didn't find that one dude, you'd be completely lost. And so you do have to be pretty proactive in searching every nook and cranny. And if you happen to miss one, then you're probably screwed.
Yeah, some of the later dungeons, in fact, are like quite devious in that there are totally invisible trap floors.
Oh, I've already found those. Yeah,
right. Which is, I also discovered is an element in, what was it? Dragon Quest 11 even includes those. No. Dragon Quest 3 includes them, which was a common element in old school JRPGs like that. Thankfully, game design has shifted away from cheap tricks like that, but it's quite an intense amount of them in later dungeons of Phantasy Star 1. So if you've been basically banging your head against the wall in a dungeon for over a couple of hours, time to pull out the guides.
Well, curiously, like, there's an early dungeon I found, it's like 4 layers deep, and I fell through a series of traps that basically took me to the bottom floor, and I was completely lost. And I was mapping out everything, but I had no way of orienting where I've got like a dozen little segments of dungeon that I have no idea how they fit together. I lost a couple of hours. Like, I also messed up a save state and hit load instead of save at one point. Lost a couple of hours, but in the act of that, figured out the best technique for mapping everything out. Like, at one point, there's a plot element where you get a compass, and the character wants the compass. You get the compass. Okay, cool. I got the fetch item done. But then I realized you can actually use the compass, and it will tell you, like, it will give you a direction in the dungeon. So if you get turned around, you can get that as a prime reference point, basically, and know which direction you're facing. And that was key to like figuring out where I am at any particular time. So yeah, enjoying the act of mapping that out and plotting my way through Phantasy Star. And like one of the key things that stood out to me why I picked this up in the first place was that it was primarily a female development team. Like the artist and the writer for the original game were women. The protagonist is a woman. It's subverting a lot of tropes in a very male dominated genre for the early part of that period.
Right, there's a cute sidekick character and a really kind of buff like sidekick dude.
It's got ladies and swords and space cats. What more could you want?
Yeah, it's kind of has like a very like Sailor Moon style art style as well for the artwork. So highly recommended that way. Really colorful as well. I appreciate that about it. Yeah, very cool. Talk about friction in your game design. What do you think, Daniel? Is it time to talk about the dessert?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Right.
If you don't mind, I'll just jump straight into it because I've got a few things that I'm kind of in the middle of and hard to talk about in detail. So what I was going to talk about was just continue talking about this book, Fight Magic Items, that I've been reading by Aidan Moher, who I believe is actually based in Vancouver Island. So another BC boy there. And so I learned of this because Aiden has a new podcast called FunFactor, where he and another co-host are reviewing old game reviews. So they're basically taking a retro game and exploring what the reaction to it was at the time that it was released retroactively. So if you really like inside baseball, some retro gaming nostalgia there, I'd recommend checking that out. But I've been reading this book, Fight Magic Items. Again, it's exploring the history of the Japanese RPG genre. It basically tracks the origin to tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, and specifically a couple of Western games being Ultima and Wizardry. Neither of which I've played, but they were hugely influential in the Japanese design scene, and the way in which these games could give you the sense of a tabletop role-playing sort of open-endedness and flexibility, but without the need for a bunch of friends and without the need of that sort of rules overhead, everything's sort of being done for you. So yeah, it is interesting going back to some of these early ones. I've not played the first Final Fantasy or the first Dungeon Quest. So we did talk a little bit about this in the Dragon Quest 3 and how it was sort of playing with that sort of the idea of just going on a quest without this need for like subtext, basically, like go and get the MacGuffin and beat the bad guy, and there's just an excuse to fight some monsters along the way, right, and defeat some traps.
Dragon Quest 1 is very short and very linear.
And it's only one character, right?
That's right, only one character in your party, and I believe I played and finished it on mobile for the first time. This was years ago, when I don't know if that version still exists right now, but it's really quick, and that's why I suppose the next HD remake Dragon Quest title is going to be 1 and 2, because
coming
1
out
is
very
pretty
soon.
short.
Yeah, and so I mean, as a whole, this book is very broad. It's like sort of sketching out very, very quickly the sort of the big picture of the history. It's obviously through a very relatively narrow niche of being Japanese games from a Western lens, and even then, like fairly limited across. Like it's the American lens is going to be very different from the European lens in that sense, right? So localization is a big deal as to what was available in that genre over the years, and thankfully they're much more widely available today, whether it's officially or through fan translations. I did find it like it's probably going to be very narrow in terms of if you're interested enough in JRPGs to not know all this already. Basically, I am basically in that sweet spot where it's sort of filled in a lot of gaps in my knowledge, not having been familiar with that early period, especially. But though some might feel it's all a little bit obvious. He's pulling on a lot of pre-existing interviews, obviously, and talk to a lot of other experts like Jason Schreier and Ash Parrish. Get a lot of mentions in there, talking through their takes on the genre. But it does have some interesting insight. Probably nothing inherently new if you're an old head in that genre. But if you just love the nostalgia of revisiting some of those classics, there's I'm sure everyone's going to find at least a few deep cuts in there that they'll want to go back and check out.
Yeah, speaking of old JRPGs, I'm trying to sort of re-educate myself on some of the early titles I missed. Some of the ones I'm intending to play on my trip to Japan are the Ys series, which were available on some of the early Sega systems as well, and they're from Nippon Falcom, which also is very, very popular now for doing the Legend of Heroes games. Trails to X, Y, Z, Zero Stars, Trails and Heroes games. So they have a storied legacy, and they have something like 11 or 12 Ys games, which I never tackled.
Ys was like started in the NES era, I believe. Like I knew that they're still coming out with those games, but that has been going on for a long. Like it's as old as Final Fantasy, basically.
And microcomputers before that. So yeah, it's a really storied series. Never really took off in the West until recently. Lots of the 3D Ys games are available on Steam and modern consoles, for instance.
Trails is another one I keep meaning to get to. I believe the first one in that series is getting a remaster this year or next, so I've been waiting on that.
Yeah, a second remake, I believe, or a remaster, because there was a one that I own on Steam already, and I'm stubborn, so I'm playing the OG on. Actually, It might not even be the original, but I'm playing it on PSP. So I intend to. I'm pretty far in that one, actually, and I'm enjoying it.
Actually, speaking of these retro games, at some point I do want to go back and play the original Final Fantasy games. I think the earliest I've played was 9, basically. I played like half an hour of 7 before when I was 14 and couldn't handle the graphics at the time. I do want to go back now, but I want to play through those originals. And if you're interested in that, a friend of the show, Alex from Meeple and the Moose, who joined us for our Seven Wonders Duel for Middle Earth review, has basically a new project where he's playing through all of the early Final Fantasy games in sequence and sort of reviewing them on his website. So go and check that out. I'll drop his link in the show notes.
Yep, and I purchased the Pixel Remaster series,
got my eye on
which
that.
I am very eager to play on the Switch Lite.
Yes.
Just seems like a perfect fit for that platform.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Talked a lot about JRPGs. All right. I'm going to talk about my dessert release, which shouldn't be new to most people who are into the medium, but I'm going to be talking about a manga this time. I talked about a novel last time, I think. You know me, I'm a Japanophile. I'm going to Japan, so I am reading a Shonen Jump manga called DanDaDan. And DanDaDan is quite popular recently because they released a Netflix anime. I started reading this before the anime was even announced, so I am one of the cool kids. I even have a keychain from the Jump store that I got on my last trip to Japan, so I will got to put that on something. Anyways, DanDaDan, I am reading the manga, which has about 190 chapters so far. I'm not nearly caught up. I'm around 110, I think. But it's just like intensifying and intensifying. Wow, what a series. So it's relatively new, as you might imagine. It's an ongoing series, and from the last 2-3 years, I have also started watching the TV show, but I think there's only like 12 episodes, so
it's the next half a season.
Yeah, they capture the very early days of the story, but the anime is really good. It's really good in its own way. I really like some of the creative choices there, and like the animation is really cutting edge and just really stylish.
The anime is so incredibly manic and frenetic, and we were talking last episode about the at least my difficulty in reading manga and the pacing and sort of language of them, and I'd struggle to picture how the energy of the anime could be captured in the manga form.
Well, you got it the other way around. Right? The manga always comes first.
Yeah.
So they translate it, and they're inventing stuff as well. The animators are always inventing things, layers upon layers, or the levels in between the panels. They're creating things. So they're obviously tasked with a creative challenge all on their own, and that's why I respect animes on their own rights. For instance, last episode we talked about Delicious in Dungeon. I think the manga is a bore, or at least the first volume I read of it, but the anime is delightful. So on the other direction, the manga for this series is fantastic. It really has such a new wave energy to it. A lot of people probably know some of the more popular Shonen Jump series pretty intimately. Dragon Ball, Bleach, Naruto, they're so One Piece. They've been around for literally decades, or have been ended for decades, but their presence, their influence is outsized, right? You cannot talk about anime or manga without talking about those. Back in the day, you would probably be talking about, hey, did you watch that Ninja Scroll? Like, how hardcore is that? Or, things like Evangelion or things like that. But, those long-running Shonen Jump series are just outsized in people's imagination, and then particularly outside of Japan. But still in Japan, too. Obviously, young people get older, they retain the love of those old series. But like Chainsaw Man, like Jujutsu Kaisen, and Witch Watch, all which have had anime releases since, this feels like really a new wave. It feels like visually kinetic, although Witch Watch is a little bit gentler in tone, but they're also it seems like free. The authors seem to feel free to talk about things that are not always on topic. Like they have like side episodes which are not always just like, let's do the beach episode or something like that. But like in Witch Watch, there's like an episode that's all talking about vintage denim. And this is in a manga that's essentially about ogres and witches and
The author
and
just has to get off the
tengus.
chest. Like, I have to get this somewhere out into the world.
Exactly. Like the characters are so like single-minded and kind of oddball in their own way. And just like that, DanDaDan, the characters are really this ragtag bunch of teens and misfits, humans and non-humans, and a lot of them play against type. You know, a lot of people have complaints about manga, especially shonen manga, which is oriented generally towards young boys. That's what shonen means. Um, they deal in tropes. Mangas always deal in tropes, and a lot of people will complain, "Oh, that's not very original. That's so been done before." And yes, it's true. But these are, I like to look at them more like they are echoing themes, and that's why they use tropes. They use
They're in communication with each
stereotypes.
other.
Precisely, they're absolutely in communication with each other. They're more like Greek myths, right? You can always tell another story about Hercules or Zeus or Hera or Athena, and you can tell them in different ways because they talk to each other. It's a continuum. Anyways, back to DanDaDan. The cast starts really small and intimate. This is a modern day story. Essentially, it's modern day high school teens, but one of the characters believes in the occult, ghosts, spirits, and the sort, and one of the characters believes in aliens. So, alien abductions and conspiracy theories and the sort. And they both essentially, and this is in the first chapter, they are from different worlds. One of them is a geek, nerd, otaku. They call him Okarun. And the other character, Momo, is a gyaru. So like a kind of gregarious, popular girl with attitude. But they form a friendship because of their antagonism. So they said, ghosts aren't real. Aliens aren't real. I totally double dog dare you to go to this secret spot where ghosts are said to appear, or this secret spot where alien abductions are said to appear. So they go to their various assignment, and wouldn't you know it, they both happen on the same night, and they have to help each other out. And thus they are reborn with new abilities and new powers, and they discover a little bit more about themselves. And it goes on and on from beyond there. Like I said, what I really like about this series is that it's using tropes and stereotypes, but it also goes against type a lot. This is a story where the women characters really stand out. The women characters are the most powerful, are the
Feels like
coolest.
It could so easily fall
bravest.
into fan service. Like it is quite sexually explicit in many ways. The anime at least.
The anime
is. Yeah, it could quite easily fit into a
yeah, and I think
misogynistic
that's
fan service tropes. Yeah.
yeah. No, I'm not downplaying that, especially the anime. The first few episodes do feel quite pervy. I'm sad to say, and that's going to turn a lot of people off. And I think that was a bad move.
But the female characters do feel like they have a lot of agency at the same time.
They are the most fascinating, the most interesting, the coolest characters in the whole series. I mean, there are aliens and there are spirits as well, and the dudes have their moments, but it's not like big brawling dudes like being bros. It feels like just oddball gang, and that's what I like. This story, this manga series really is hard. You cannot fit it into one genre. I already told you it's about the occult and aliens. I can't remember the last story that tried to do both. Maybe really old ones like Urusei Yatsura or something like that from Rumiko Takahashi. Like obviously there's been things that have done cross-genre stuff before, but they haven't done that in a while. Usually shonen manga sticks to a lane, chooses a lane and sticks to it. This is doing the opposite. It's like trying to expand the envelope, and similarly they're doing impressive stuff with the aesthetics as well. Like Some of the characters, they always wear these weird T-shirts, and they have these odd backpacks that have strange designs on them. And each one, I'm like, I want to buy that. I want to buy that. I want to buy that.
Very stylish, yeah.
Super stylish. So, and what I really like as well is that with long-running series, they tend to get a little samey. They tend to get repetitive. They tend to tread on a lot of ground. And then they also like stretch things out unnecessarily. This one, I'm really pleased to see that you just don't know what's going to happen every chapter. Like some even like minor characters get entire chapters dedicated to their story. So what they might do, what I read recently, was like super like fifth string character got an entire chapter to go over what he was doing at the same time that another big event was happening. So you got to see the events happening from his perspective. And then there was a 6-chapter arc about another side character that, like, I would read that series in a heartbeat. So they kind of like did a backdoor pilot almost, like a story within a story, a series within a series. It almost felt like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where it's like, where are we now?
The anime did feel like it was actively trying to not be formulaic and like subverting your expectations pretty frequently.
Yeah. So there's a lot to love here, and it's just getting better and better and more intense. Chapters around plus 100 plus, like Chainsaw Man at around 100, it totally fell off the rails. There was something to do with that series being taken off of the manga and being relegated to the website or something like that for a while. I don't know the full story. I can't report upon that there, but they went to like a total like left turn quite dramatically. And in this one, they're just stretching and pulling and morphing into multiple different directions. So it feels a lot more, I don't know, just kinetic and intense is what I'm saying. So these chapters, 100 plus, are getting so intense. They're like on the level of Avengers Endgame already. And it only took like 2 or 3 years, not 15 years like that film series or some of those comic series lasted. So I'm loving it, essentially. You can tell I'm very enthused about this one. And it's the series I'm mainlining right now. I'm reading a little bit of Me and Roboko, which is like a gag manga on the side of it, which kind of provides like a little bit of a palette cleanser aside on that. And then other genres of manga on other platforms. But DanDaDan, a little hard to spell. Just basically start with DanDaDan and you should be good. It's on the Shonen Jump app in North America. And, basically all the chapters are available, can be read. Tons of back catalog can be read. It's like $5 Canadian a month or something. Wow. Well worth it. Available on Android and Apple. And
I believe season 2 of the anime is coming out very soon.
Yeah, but, it's just so far behind the story. Just I can't stop reading the manga. Although I'll catch up eventually, but that's a problem for future me. Okay, what do you think? Should we wrap it there?
Yeah, let's call it there. Possibly for the summer. We'll see if we find time for another episode next week.
Yeah, basically, then if we were to do an episode next week, I would be flying out the next day. I just feel like it's a little close. So maybe we might put out like a short episode next week. We'll see. But if you don't hear from us, don't worry. We are coming back. You will hear from us again in August, 100%.
I think this was a good capper, cleaning up a few miscellaneous topics that we've been sitting on for a little while. And we're sure to have lots of inspiration to talk about coming back from our respective trips.
Yeah, that's right. You're going to a new con, I believe you said?
Yes, in PlayCon in Sydney. Yep.
That's right. And I'll be trying to collect a lot more game material. If we talk about anything next week, I'd like to share my list, my growing list of game titles I'm looking to find while I'm in Japan.
Excellent. It's good luck with that hunt.
Thank you. Oh, it's all thanks to Cardboard East and Amanda Panda for sharing that suggestion with me. Anyways, let's end it here for now.
Yeah, well, if you have any thoughts or questions on today's topics or games, you can contact us at omnigamersclub@gmail.com or at our website, omnigamers.club.
Yeah, and that's right. And go check us out on YouTube if you haven't seen our videos there. We share video of our episodes every time a new one goes out. And if you want to catch our back catalog, you can catch that on a pod catcher of your choice. We're available in all the main ones. So like, subscribe, leave comments. They really energize us. We have no monetization going on, so we're just doing it for the love. Please give your feedback. It really means a lot. And I promise we will get back to your comments on those various platforms.
Yep, and plenty of time to catch up on that backlog over the summer break. So, dig through this and send your favorite games to your friends and share the podcast.
We never cover the new hotness anyway, so you have plenty of old classics to review on our back channel.
Yep.
Back catalog.
Well, stay tuned to Bluesky for any updates. You can find us there at OmniGamersClub, and you can find me at Board Game Feast.
You can find me as OmniGamer Mark on Bluesky as well. All right, Daniel, possibly until August. You want to lead us off?
Yes, remember to have a balanced diet of games. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.